I broke 3 times.
Okay, hello. This is Life on Planets Next Hangout, and we have a serious guest here. It's Stan Truitt. He's a specialist in telescopes, and he built telescopes, and he flew on airplanes, and he did many things in his life. And today we talk stories about telescopes. How many telescopes mirrors were broken, how many times, what pizza flying over, and so on. Welcome, Stan.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
Yes,
So
welcome,
Stan, first maybe. Hi, Kevin. So first, maybe Stan, you tell us, like, can you give us a list of all your funniest experience in technology?
Okay, I don't know what's. I don't know technology. I don't know what is. I don't know what is funny to others, but well, you mentioned pizza there very briefly, and well, in the when they made the 200-inch at Palomar, in order to get some practice on large blanks, they made a couple of blanks smaller, and one of them was 120 inches and was going to be used to test the 200-inch. And what happened with it is that it just stayed in the warehouse for a long time because they decided they didn't really need to use it, and it stayed in the warehouse for almost a decade, I guess.
Wow.
And then they ground it and made an F5, I believe, telescope out of it. And now it's at Lick Observatory at Mount Hamilton in California.
Oh, that's 120.
It's 120 inches. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
And so, like the 200-inch, there's an observer's cage in the middle of the telescope that the observer rides on as the telescope tracks its stars. Or at least they used to. And it's a nice little insulated cage. And despite the rules at the observatory, no eating in the observatory, Mount Hamilton is
no coffee on the telescope.
Yeah, right. It's close enough to San Jose to where they can get pizza delivered, at least at a halfway point. Then they brought the pizza up. Well, there's kind of an elevator like structure that's open, and the person that is handing something to the observer is not well covered, and he was handing this illegal pizza over to the observer, and the pizza slips out of the box, and this is a tall telescope, and the thing sailed around like a frisbee.
Oh my!
And landed right on
the mirror.
Right on the mirror. Guess what? Side down. Pepperoni side down. Yeah. They couldn't. It was too good to keep under there. But it was told to me as a true story by a person who was there.
Oh my God.
And so I believe it.
So when was it?
It was in the late 50s.
Late 50s. Wow. So that is the Palomar pepperoni pizza, or
yeah. Right. It's
PPP, Palomar pepperoni pizza.
Really. So
wow.
that's one as far as kind of a funny thing, but
I know one story. You know, I heard also as a student. I was visiting observatory for practicum. You know, in Crimea, and there is this old-fashioned telescope from beginning of the century. That huge, you know, big column. It was only what was it, 25-inch only?
It was probably a refractor.
Yeah, no, reflector, 25-inch, but reflector, and a huge column, very high, so that when you observe, that was photographic plate observations yet in those times. So the observer would take carriage to like a big staircase, like moving staircase. Yeah, you could climb up and then move towards the camera, change the film or whatever plate, and then go away, and then kind of observing it, exposure, and then do it again. So I heard a story that one guy was like not very comfortable. Somehow the position of the telescope was not very comfortable, so he climbed over the telescope in order to change the camera plate, and he was a little slow, so there was guidance working. So the telescope rotated off that carriage, you know, so he couldn't get back, you know. So he had to stay on that telescope the whole night.
Oh, they couldn't.
Until the morning, because the telescope was continuing guiding and was further and further, and the height was like 3 meters. He cannot jump there, you know.
Yeah.
If he jumps, he breaks the leg. So he was sitting on this telescope and guiding the whole night and exposing, I guess, until
Nice long exposure.
Yes, exactly. And then until morning, he was hearing that people were walking around, started to walk around around the observatory. You know, he started to yell, "Hey, help!" You know, somebody came in and took him down. You know?
Get me off of this thing. Yeah. There was a 48-inch satellite tracking telescope in Cloudcroft, New Mexico, and it had an eyepiece station on it, and everybody would love to take a look through that thing, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so many of the people, its main purpose was to photograph satellites,
Mm-hmm.
and to take video of satellites.
Right.
But everybody wanted to look at various objects through it.
Yeah,
and
I can imagine.
There was a guy, his name was an Air Force person, his name was Tyson, and he took one of these rescue little boats that they take people for mountaineering, you know, somebody would fall and break their legs and stuff, and then they put them in this basket. It's kind of like a metal basket.
Okay, for carrying people.
You know, for carrying,
people.
yeah. And he put some hinges on it and
Mm-hmm.
made a little thing over so you could actually look through the telescope and be safe.
Oh.
You know, instead of, because the eyepiece moves, you know, and the satellites move at degrees per second.
That's fast, yeah.
And so it's really
Taking
quite,
movie,
it's really dynamic and scary.
Mm-hmm,
and so
he made a kind of cage protection.
Yeah.
Shark cage.
and on one of them there was I think it was called an S4B. It was a booster, and it had a little flag in the United States painted on the side of the rocket. This was a rocket in orbit, but it didn't have any packages. It was just a booster. And I got to look through it at that one, and I could see where the flag was, but I couldn't see that it was really an American flag.
Okay.
But I could see it says United States on the side of it. So that was a good enough resolution to see that. And I was kind of thrilled by it. I loved it. Plus it was exciting having, you know, looking through a telescope, feeling the breeze go by as the telescope scanned across the sky.
Wow. Yeah, you could follow the rocket with the telescope. Wow, that's amazing.
It was good.
Yeah. That technology, I mean, it's really amazing that astronomical telescopes, they usually don't move that fast, but those special...
even slewing, they don't, you know, move. I think the fastest satellite moves like up to 6 degrees per second.
Wow.
Or some of the objects that I can
you can
remember.
see it by eye when you look in the sky. Yeah,
but 1 or 2 degrees per second is a lot, and compared to you know 15 degrees an hour.
Yeah, that's right. Wow, that's amazing. So how many telescopes you know whose mirrors were like initially broken and then another one was made?
Well, the 200-inch had a kind of a rocky start, because when they cast it was cast out of Pyrex, and Pyrex was kind of like a new product at the time, and the Corning was pushing it, trying to get it into the stores and whatnot. And what they had is when you cast a glass telescope, you have to let the glass cool very slowly so the stresses can relieve themselves as the mirror goes from a liquid to a more solid state.
Right.
And during this process is called annealing. And during the annealing process, they had a flood and the river rose. And the electrical equipment, the heavy electrical equipment, was all down on the floor below the where the mirror was in its hot container.
Right.
And it's cast in, and that's the same container it was cast in.
Right.
So they moved the electrical equipment as quickly as they could up to the floor above, and reconnected everything and got it going again. So it was electrically heated. And what was true is that they didn't. That was very unknown, because 24 hours without it going through its normal, very slow cooling process, they were unsure how much stress was going to be in the mirror from this interruption of this cooling cycle. And so they were really happy to see that it was not badly stressed.
It wasn't, yeah.
So not badly stressed.
24 hours was okay, yeah, to keep it like, wow.
But yeah. And
so they were afraid of water coming into cellar.
No, it did come into the cellar. Yeah, it did come in.
It didn't damage the mirror, though.
No, but the mirror was on the floor above, and so it didn't get wet.
All right.
But that was interesting. Also, the 200-inch had a couple of other problems, and one was that in order not to have to cast so much material, and it has certain structural and thermal qualities to have pockets in the back of the mirror, kind of like a waffle.
Right.
And this cellular geometry allows a high stiffness to mass ratio, lower mass, so there's less heat to get rid of, and certain other things. So what they did is they put some ceramic blocks in the back of the mirror, where the mirror was poured into. And
yeah, I've seen it. They do really first kind of distribute those blocks.
Yeah, they put the blocks and tie them down.
And then they pour the glass.
And then they pour the glass, and the glass rises above. And the face of the mirror is on top of that. And the back of the mirror, when the blocks are removed, have all the holes in it.
Exactly.
Well, yeah, and what happened was they had these blocks, and they didn't realize that the blocks were rather low density ceramics. And the Pyrex has a density of about aluminum. It's not really high, but it's
like filled in
about twice as much as water. And so what they had is they didn't calculate the buoyancy of those blocks. And so that the strength of the bolts that were holding the blocks down, when the bolts got hot, they're not as strong. And so the bolts broke loose, and those blocks floated to the top of the surface of the mirror.
Wow. So the blocks were on the top of the mirror.
Yeah, floating around. And so
that's a great mirror, yeah.
So they cooled that kind of quickly.
They made it upside down.
Yeah, really. They broke that out. And what happened was they broke that into chunks, designed some new bolts, so where they could actually circulate some air through them to keep them keep them strong. And what happened was that was the one that then those blocks were placed on top of the those blocks that were held down by the bolts. Then the whole thing was brought up in temperature, and it melted down. And that is the 200-inch that we have now, the one that they were worried about, the stress from for the river rising.
Okay, and then they got the pizza on top of it.
Yeah, really.
First they got the blocks, and then they got the pizza.
Yeah, so that's
a really interesting mirror. Went through several stages of baking.
Really? Well, I think they made a 72-inch, and then for practice, and they made the 120. But they were going to use the 120 for a test flat. They were going to grind it flat instead of curved. But then they had this very nice cellular mirror blank around, and so they decided that they could make a high quality 120 out of it, and turned out to be right.
That's excellent. Kevin, does this story inspire you for telescopes bigger diameter?
Yeah, definitely. Shows you the inner workings of how they're actually made.
Yeah, those mirrors are all handmade, unique.
Yeah, even the 200, even though you couldn't possibly grind it, by hand and all that, but it was hand finished. When they finally got the telescope up get the mirror into the telescope, they could test it, and you can even test it on a star. with the reflection off the unilluminized surface. So it's not really a very good reflector, but it is about 4%.
Wow.
And so you can see stars and whatnot and do tests in it. And there was this fellow named Don Hendricks who was in charge of finishing the mirror. He actually rubbed it on with his, not just with hand tools, but with his hand.
Wow.
In order to
really
he
to
found
bring
that
it to the
he would do testing and identify the high spots and then rub the high spots down.
amazing, amazing. This is handmade in USA.
Yeah, really, really. Upcountry
Wow.
San Diego. Yeah, that was pretty nice. And
wow. Well, that mirror is amazing. It's still working pretty well here.
Yeah, it was working really well for a long time until the supports that went that hold it from the back, the support they corroded over after about 50 years, and they had to replace those, and that was kind of a major thing. But except for that interrupt, it got bad. Also, there was some warpage due to some strain or something in the telescope itself, which they compensated for by putting a wooden bows, like a bow and arrow. They would put wooden bows across part of the back of the mirror in order to warp the telescope, so the telescope would warp the mirror into a good shape.
Wow.
Into a better shape. So that was kind of like biasing with wood.
It's creative, yeah.
Yeah, it was. And somebody at least I'm told that somebody had those they saw that wood stuff behind the mirror, and they take that off of there. So they took it off, and the
telescope fell apart.
The telescope didn't perform. So they
put it back.
Put some back. Yeah,
that's great. Yeah.
So like the first version of active optics.
What's that?
I said, is that the first version with supports of active optics?
Exactly. Yeah, that is.
It is kind of like that. It was kind of
active optics. Yeah.
And then, actually, when you have a big mirror like that, you actually tune them by adjusting the supports.
Sure. Well, thank you so much, Stan, for this wonderful stories about telescope histories.
I'm very pleased to share it.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so it was really a great pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
Yes, thanks, Stan.
See you next time.
Nice
Aloha.
Aloha.